There is a strange, a really counterintuitive tension in modern intellectual life.
Hmm.
We rigorously trust the rational mind, I mean the human intellect, to master things like quantum physics, to build these incredibly complex mathematical models.
To explain the universe. It's our sovereign tool.
Exactly, our sovereign tool. Yet, we are often prompted, maybe even culturally encouraged, to just dismiss that very same mind when it perceives something else.
When it perceives a profound structural coherence, an intrinsic, almost architectural signature within the
As a
cosmos,
pattern.
a systemic pattern that, you know, strongly suggests intentional design rather than just
Okay.
simple accident. And that's what you're engaging with us today, not as passive observers looking for comfort, but really as forensic thinkers examining a system.
Okay, so let's define the framework we're looking at, the sovereign intellect perspective. It posits that the human mind is not just a biological consequence of random processes. It's a calibrated receiver?
That's the term. But here's the challenge for you, for the listener. If the intellect is just a receiver, doesn't that inherently limit our agency, our creativity?
It sounds like it does.
And that's precisely the tension the source material gets into. If we accept the premise that the divine signal, what the source poetically calls radiance, or Zaya, is
Yeah.
always being broadcast,
Okay.
then our intellect is the specific lens designed to capture and focus that light. Think of it as an optical mirror, not a light source. It's calibrated to reflect the truth of the object standing before it.
So this fundamentally shifts the discussion.
It does. We're not making a leap of faith into the irrational. We are, for the first time, actually trusting the resolution of our own intellectual eyes. We're demanding the same precision in theology that we demand in pure mathematics.
So our mission in this deep dive is to isolate those systemic proofs from the text, the inherent impossibility of ungodly acts by Allah. Because this work asserts that divine perfection isn't a contingent choice, it's not something the divine chooses to maintain, it's axiomatic, a necessary truth. Our job is to extract the logical foundation for that absolute claim.
And that takes us straight to the foundational axiom, the necessary constraint of perfection. True divinity, by its very definition, must entail absolute, non-contingent perfection. That has to be the starting point. Otherwise, the whole logical structure just falls apart.
So to even ascribe an ungodly act to the divine, something like injustice or falsehood, or even the capacity for error, that would be a category error.
A fundamental contradiction of the essential definition. Perfection is the structural prerequisite.
It's built in.
It is. And the text immediately grounds this. It grounds it in the Quranic foundations of divine perfection, specifically citing Surah Al-Ikhlas.
Chapter 1.
Yes. That very brief chapter is, in essence, a metaphysical negation. Say, He is Allah, who is one Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent. That absolute singularity, it just negates any possibility of deficiency or imperfection.
Because any deficiency would imply a need or some kind of equivalent external force.
Precisely.
The text also draws a very, very sharp line here. It distinguishes its framework from what it calls mystical fog.
Subjective interpretations, emotional feelings.
Right, and instead it focuses on objective revelation.
Correct. And objective revelation here refers to two things: the systemic, observable laws of the universe, physics, gravity, motion, and the absolute, verifiable structural coherence of the revealed text itself. The discussion of Allah's nature has to be rigorous, systematic, logical. Injustice is, by definition, a defect. A perfect being cannot possess defects.
I want to focus on that systemic, that structural necessity for a moment. Let's use the geometric constant metaphor. God as the uncaused cause. It's structurally analogous to the number one in mathematics.
Okay, unpack.
Well, without the existence and, more importantly, the integrity of that first singular value, the whole number system that follows, which we can call the universe, it just collapses into incoherence.
That's a powerful analogy.
Right.
But let's push it. If that foundation, that number one, were mutable, if it could randomly change its own value, its own definition, what specific systems would collapse beyond, say, our morality?
Everything. Everything that relies on predictability. The source suggests that if the ultimate cause could be unjust, which means arbitrary, inconsistent, prone to error.
Then the whole system of consequence that flows from it.
Exactly. The laws of physics, logic itself would become mutable. The constants wouldn't be constant. His existence, perfect and uncompromised, is the ultimate prerequisite for all logical systems.
And that profound requirement for logical integrity, that brings us right to the central philosophical confusion that the source material really wants to tackle.
The paradox. Omnipotence versus logical contradiction.
Yes. We know the Quran repeatedly affirms supreme power, versus confirming Allah has power over all things,
Hmm.
so this naturally brings up that classic question.
If he is truly all-powerful, why would he be incapable of injustice? Doesn't true power mean you can break the rules? Even your own rules?
And the source material offers a highly sophisticated, a very precise definition of omnipotence here. True power, in this framework, is fundamentally bound by divine wisdom and coherence. It includes doing all that is logically possible.
And all that is meaningful.
And all that is meaningful. The capacity for self-contradiction isn't seen as power, it's seen as meaninglessness.
So an ungodly act is not some powerful choice that God is just holding back for ethical reasons. It's an inherently meaningless construct, an act that violates the axiomatic definitions of his own perfect essence.
Right.
But isn't the impossibility of, say, creating a square circle, isn't that just a linguistic trick? Couldn't an infinite power just bypass grammar, bypass the limitations of language itself?
That is the core of the challenge. And the text is very clear. The limitation isn't linguistic, it's ontological. It's about reality itself. We use the square circle example to illustrate an axiomatic violation.
A shape cannot simultaneously have the definition of square and circle in reality.
It cannot. And the divine is defined by absolute justice and truth. So for the divine to act unjustly is to ask for a being defined by justice.
Yeah.
To perform an action defined by the absence of justice. It's a self-negation.
It's like that other paradox, producing an unmovable object in a universe that also has an irresistible force.
They negate each other structurally. Both premises can't coexist in a defined reality. The logical corollary here is critical. Self-contradictory acts like the divine lying while being purely truthful. They aren't limitations on power.
They're just meaningless.
They are meaningless linguistic negations that cannot be enacted in reality because they lack being. They fall outside the domain of true power, which is the power to create and sustain meaningful realities.
This shifts the burden of proof entirely.
It does.
It's not about proving what the divine can't do. It's about recognizing that certain statements we make, they just don't correspond to any reality that could possibly exist, even with infinite power. The result is, well, the quiet weight of truth. Perfection becomes a mathematical certainty.
Which is the perfect pivot. If that settles the philosophical case for necessary perfection, then let's get to the ethical ramifications. This brings us to the structure of divine attributes and moral teleology.
The divine attributes, justice, truthfulness, wisdom, they're presented not as just, desirable qualities. They are necessary and non-contradictory features of his essence.
So injustice is incompatible with his being, not because some outside law prevents it.
But because his own internal absolute perfection just rules it out. His essence, in this view, is the law unbent.
And what's fascinating is the systemic consequence of this for us, for humanity. If God's essence provides that perfect moral order, the source and stability of truth, then our morality is just, a faint reflection of that system.
We are the brook reflecting, with a, quote, timid and finite gleam, the great untroubled and eternal stream.
That provides an objective anchor for ethics, which is something philosophy has been searching for centuries.
And that structural dependency has a pretty stark implication for our actions, doesn't it? If Allah were, in fact, capable of injustice or error just once,
The whole thing collapses.
all moral values would instantly dissolve into pure arbitrariness. Truth becomes, as the text says, an empty street. It undermines any attempt at virtue because your foundation is basically quicksand. How do you build an ethical system on that?
You can't. And this systemic coherence is why the human role is defined so rigorously. We are the Khalifa,
The trustee?
the administrator,
We're different.
designated as administrators of this systemic logic, and we're tasked with upholding the reflected moral order in our finite realm. We are not passive observers in some morally arbitrary universe. We are active agents, and our responsibility is to manage and reflect that untroubled stream.
Okay, so we've established the necessity philosophically. But how do we get from this abstract argument to the human, the internal confirmation of this truth? We have to move to how our system is designed to interact with this perfect reality.
Calibrated receiver and resonance.
Right.
First, we have to reinforce transcendence, because his reality has to be above our human defects, like error or duplicity. The Quran says, no vision can grasp him, but his grasp is over all vision. His reality is distinct from our flawed perception of it.
Okay, so if the reality is transcendent, how is our intellect, the human intellect, designed to interface with it without error? How do we confirm that perfect structural coherence for ourselves?
That's where the inherent human logic gate comes in, which the source material defines as fitra,
Natural inclination.
natural inclination. It's like the operating system we're all born with, preloaded to recognize pattern, coherence, and truth. This calibration is what instinctively recoils from injustice and, responds to beauty and logical order. Our internal system is built to resonate with the signal of ultimate perfection.
And this internal resonance is then supported objectively by external verifiable proof. That's the concept of IJAZ.
Inimitability. This refers to the objective, mathematical, the linguistic signature that's embedded within the revelation itself. It provides objective proof of its non-human origin. It confirms the very coherence that the intellect, the fitra, is designed to receive.
So it's a lock and key.
It's the convergence point. If we use the signal and the receiver metaphor one last time, the universe itself is the continuous broadcast, the ayat filled with signs and coherent laws.
And the human psyche is the pre-tuned receiver, the fitra.
Exactly. Faith, then, in this intellectual context, is simply the deliberate act of clearing the static, the arbitrary noise of human error, cultural bias, contradictory thought, all so you can successfully receive the perfectly coherent signal of truth.
It's the ultimate acceptance of the logical proof that's being presented by the objective structure of reality itself.
Precisely. And the profound realization of the source material is that when you follow these axioms to their necessary endpoint, faith is not a reckless leap into the dark.
No.
It becomes the final, inescapable conclusion of a fully rational mind that has successfully trusted its own internal capacity for logic and coherence. The text establishes divine perfection as a systemic, a mathematical certainty, not some contingent theological request.
And this structural guarantee that God's essence is perpetually righteous and immutable, the law unbent, that brings us to our final thought for you to consider. If this absolute, untroubled stream of perfection exists as the foundational axiom of everything, what does that imply about the human capacity as the Khalifa?
That's the question. If the divine architect cannot build a flawed structure because of his own perfect nature, what responsibility does the human trustee then have to mirror that perfection? Not just in our personal ethics,
But in the systems, the institutions we build.
Exactly.
How does one reflect that great, untroubled stream with a timid, finite gleam? If our foundational trust is in the perfect, non-contingent justice of the source, what is our ethical obligation to establish sustained, non-contingent goodness in our own finite world? That is the ultimate challenge posed by the sovereign intellect.